This episode of Sales Players is brought to you by Leadfeeder. You can use the link in the show notes to set up a 21-day extended trial of Leadfeeder for you and your team. You're a sales hunter with literally hundreds of target accounts in your territory and no idea who in your patch is even in the market for your solution. You've pulled all the reports, built all the lists, and you've done a bunch of account research, but you're still in the dark about where to find your low-hanging fruit. And look, you could waste another quarter smiling and dialing, grinding through a cold list and blasting out emails, or you could do what I do and get Leadfeeder. Leadfeeder identifies the companies that visit your company's website and tracks on-site activity so you can see which leads from your region are ready to buy right now. Leadfeeder has customizable notifications, lead scoring, routing, and it works seamlessly with your CRM system. Right now, Sales Players has got the hookup on an extended 21-day free trial offer. So be sure to use the link in the show notes to sign up. Stop burning time and resources on leads that don't convert and sign up for Leadfeeder. Welcome to Sales Players, the #1 podcast for top players in B2B sales.
Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out in the world of sales, this is the show for you.
We're all about bringing you fresh, actionable ideas to supercharge your rev gen game.
We dive deep into the mindset, habits, and tools used by top performers in the industry. Generate more leads, close more deals, and build wealth and financial security in B2B sales.
So if you're ready to level up, you've come to the right place. Join the conversation with other like-minded sales players and continue the discussion beyond the show.
Hit the subscribe button, tune into the Sales Players, and let's start winning together.
All right, Sales Players, we are live with yet another fantastic guest on the show today. Joining us is Kevin McIntyre. Am I saying your last name right, Kevin, actually? McIntyre?
Maybe we should have done that in the warm-up. But
Yeah. We should have nailed it. Awesome. So Kevin is the CRO of, is it Dealfront or Leadfeeder or both? How does that work?
good question. So it is Dealfront.
Yeah.
Dealfront is the result of a merger of two European companies in kind of mid to late 2022. Leadfeeder, headquartered in Finland with very much a global presence, well, primarily North America and Europe, focused on web visitor identification, and EchoBot, which is a sales intelligence company for B2B company and contact data, operating out of Germany. And together, Dealfront represents a sales and marketing intelligence platform, really supporting go-to-market teams, be oriented and focused on accounts that are primed for conversion. And I think in today's day and age, and I'm sure we'll dive into some of this in which I feel that like sales is starting to ruin sales, the way that outreach is going these days, focusing on the right types of customers where you have the best opportunity to be successful and really being kind of trigger-based, leveraging first-party intent, and having the right information to engage, right account, right time, right message is what we're all about.
Awesome. Well, I think a good starting place for our listeners is they probably want to learn a little bit more about who you are and what you've done and what got you to the point you're at today as CRO of Dealfront. Take us way back. How did you get into the revenue generation business?
Yeah. Thank you for that. And again, thank you for the opportunity. Happy to be here with the Sales Players podcast. And thank you, Jesse and Chase, for inviting me.
Of course.
So if starting from where I am now, so I've somehow stumbled and found myself into a first-time CRO role. Never really anticipated being here. We go all the way back to when I was in university. I was majoring in finance, studying economics. Thought I was going to get into like financial management, wealth management, that kind of area. Then we had this little economic hiccup in 2008, and I graduated in 2009 and just don't really know what kind of person is going to want to invest or take financial advice from a 22-year-old in the state of the economy.
Yeah.
So I had a bit of a pivot, and I was interning at a tech company in the Pittsburgh area that came out of Carnegie Mellon University. I mean, it's a source of kind of great education and talent. And there was a company called Vivissimo. I'm sure nobody has heard of that. but it played in a space called enterprise search, which was allowing kind of knowledge workers to access kind of unstructured content across the enterprise, regardless of the source. So I was doing some interning there and ended up staying on full time and really kind of crafted the first sales operations role at that organization. So I think at the time, if memory serves me, it must have been kind of 12 to 14 million in revenue, kind of somewhere along those lines. And sales ops at the time was something I had no idea about in 2009, 2010, and started crafting that, helping get kind of sales process in place, helping with pricing, proposal management, working with the marketing team with some marketing metrics and so on, and just kind of crafted my own path. Then I was fortunate enough to go through an acquisition experience with IBM in 2012 and into their, at the time, the big data space. That's a buzzword that's actually kind of is less buzzy these days. I don't remember kind of the days of big data, and I can't remember actually the last time I've heard that. But going through that experience was very eye-opening to me. I kind of formed some good relationships with some senior folks at IBM through that, and was allowed kind of gifted the opportunity to be a part of kind of an ongoing sales operation, sales strategy, kind of go-to-market orchestration in that area. And over my time at IBM, kind of grew into a number of different roles in kind of global kind of sales go-to-market leadership, oftentimes managing kind of sales, like SMEs, kind of like overlay type roles that really knew the technology, were really close to product management, would help local teams. So I was in kind of a data and analytics, data science, cloud database area. And I will say that my 6 or 7 years at IBM truly was more valuable than anything I've ever received in education. And it's just the opportunity to see how a company of that size works, especially during that time when they were trying to really find out what the new IBM would look like, when they were certainly behind in the cloud space for what like Amazon and even Microsoft and Google were starting to do. And the IBM cloud was not, I think, where they wanted it to be. And I think you look at IBM stock over the last kind of 6 to 12 months, and it's popped incredibly. And I think they've done an incredible job at pivoting and what they're doing for AI, for the enterprise, among other areas. That being said, after my time there of just getting to meet customers all over the world, work with local teams and kind of all over the place, and just seeing how decisions are made operationally, what it takes to run a company of that size, how decisions are made. Just wanted to get back to something a bit smaller. Had the opportunity to join ZoomInfo, the original ZoomInfo.
Before the merger with Discover.org.
Right. So this was out of like just outside of Boston in a community called Waltham. The then CEO of ZoomInfo was someone from my network at IBM. So went there to run kind of RevOps, enablement, and kind of go-to-market leadership. But again, not in a frontline sales role, mostly on kind of orchestration and supporting teams. Then Henry Schuck and the Discover.org team took a major risk that has paid off for them wonderfully. Purchasing ZoomInfo and subsequently rebranding as ZoomInfo. And I give him credit for having the foresight and understanding of where the brand recognition was, and giving up the name of his baby of Discover.org and taking on ZoomInfo, which I'm sure was not an easy personal decision for him. Stayed there for a number of years, moved to another company, Enterprise DB, focused kind of on Postgres. As I don't know if we have a lot of sales professionals here, so talking about open source databases might not resonate as much. But I moved to Europe with that opportunity. So that was in a global role, again, very much on RevOps, enablement, go-to-market leadership, structuring, kind of sales cycle engagement, customer journey type work. And after moving to Europe, the Dealfront opportunity presented itself. And when I had the opportunity to be considered for a CRO role, I couldn't turn it down. And here I am 2 years later, and time goes by so fast, but at the same time, it feels like it's been 17 years. So that was probably much more lengthy introduction than you were looking for. But my path to a CRO is probably not your typical one, much more on the operational side than going from like SDR to AE to team lead to director, VP of sales, et cetera. But there are different paths.
And Kevin, like one of the things that I really lean into, especially with just going through, just moving through roles and creating community, was your role at IBM, was it in person or was it actually in office? Were you in office at IBM?
I was remote.
Okay.
Pretty much the entire time. I mean, I was in a lot of offices because I'm truly fortunate to get to travel the world. I mean, there were years where I was doing 300,000 plus miles a year on a plane. I think I did a calculation once that I had spent an entire month in a plane. I love traveling. Don't get me wrong, but it's not all glam, and it is taxing. Certainly personal life, relationships, and your own health kind of gets sacrificed a bit to have those kinds of opportunities.
And so, so like
sorry.
how in Boston did you get connected with that Zoom Info role and then get connected to like moving over to Europe? Like, I really want to understand the European, like how they network over there, because what I found is these European SaaS companies like Limless, they're like popping off over in Europe.
They really are.
Everything like seems like in France and Italy, it's really coming up. And I just want to understand, is everybody talking to each other, or is there meetups? What's happening there?
Yeah, that's a great set of questions there. So I'll try and unpack them a bit. And if I missed anything, please keep me honest here. So where to start? So I think first the time at IBM enabled me to have a broader appreciation for different sales cultures and the way that you work with different teams and how they do business. Now, granted, the way IBM does business with businesses is much different than a 50-person like SaaS startup or scale up, right? But it still gave me exposure to what a lot of like American-based companies just don't get that opportunity. The move from IBM to Zoom Info was really enabled through a personal relationship that I had made at IBM, and this individual who I worked with took on a leadership role at Zoom Info and approached me with an opportunity, and just it was that time. I think after 6 or 7 years. I mean, granted, I'm speaking very highly of my time at IBM, but I will not hesitate to say it was incredibly stressful. It's definitely a company in certain roles, probably not all roles, but in certain roles, especially global ones, the machine wants you to work 24 hours a day and like unapologetically. And it gets grueling. So wanted a breath of fresh air, had the opportunity to work at Zoom Info. And again, that was just through networking and just building up kind of good relationships and just had an opportunity come with me. The move to Europe was essentially facilitated through kind of my own curiosity. The company I was with at the time, Enterprise DB, again, focused on enterprise adoption of Postgres, which is an open source database. It was a global company in nature. So, I mean, and at this point, definitely a 9-figure company. I hope I'm not saying anything out of bounds there. That's not very specific, but definitely a growing, very reputable company, and just had a very strong European presence. And they had gone through an acquisition at the very beginning of COVID, acquiring a European competitor that had an Italian office. And so there was an Italian legal entity. I have Italian kind of cultural heritage. My wife's family, I think, originates from Sicily if you go back kind of 2 or 3 generations. And so we both had an affinity for the country. And we got married during COVID and just kind of realized that if we ever wanted to do this, this would be the time to do it. We have a path to try and make the ask. We didn't have kids yet. And it's like, let's just do it. And thankfully, the company was willing, because I was in a global role, that, you know what, we'll help make this happen, and went through painstaking amount of paperwork and process, but eventually got it to work. And we got stood up in Italy. And it was kind of a strange turn of events in which, after being there for roughly 6 or 7 months and settling into the role, this new opportunity presented itself. So it was a bit awkward, in which one employer had gifted this opportunity and was very supportive, but kind of something else came my way that I couldn't turn down. And I think where I am now at Dealfront, it was brave, I think, of the co-founders of EchoBot and Leadfeeder, Bastian Karveg and Pekka Koskinen, respectively, to support an American leading the revenue organization of what is a predominantly European team. I mean, 80% of our revenue and approximately our customer base as well is coming through Europe. Particularly with EchoBot being a primarily German company, and having trust that I was not going to be just like that kind of typical American cowboy leader using American football analogies, everything about sports, just like push, and having what in reality, like an American work ethic in the grind that, like, don't get me wrong, Europeans work hard and they can grind too, but there are real meaningful cultural differences that you have to understand. And I didn't understand all of them, but I think I was able to demonstrate that through my experience and exposure working for global teams, I learn and I adapt. And I'm not going to come in with this kind of bullish mindset of just, I know how to get things done, and just kind of push it forward. And you have to be adaptable. And the way that we manage and sell to customers in Germany is going to be different than the way you go to market in Finland, or the way that we're trying to improve business in the US. And it's complicated.
Yeah. I think something that would really help our listeners is if you could elaborate a bit on that. So from the standpoint of most of our listeners are in the North America, US regions. But as we're discussing, there's a lot going on in Europe, a lot of companies launching out there, and there's a lot of business opportunities out there. And I've actually found myself just over the last 2.5 years having more inbound leads and things like that coming in from Europe. What are some very high level advice you'd give to a US sitting rep who might be selling into a Europe territory, or maybe someone who's in your shoes, which is joining a European company or selling into European companies? Any advice for how to kind of dial back maybe some of that cowboy? I literally had a prospect in the UK once call me a cowboy, and he's not wrong. I live in the Southwest, so but it was an interesting statement. So yeah, like any ways we can kind of dial back like that American spirit a little bit, just to be a little more professional on their turf.
Absolutely. And I think the number one thing that I would say, and this is a hard thing to get right, is that you have to be local. And local language, local understanding of buying and selling cultures is important. A German company is going to have a higher propensity to buy from someone speaking German to them. Germans, by and large, speak pretty damn good English.
Yeah.
And most of the countries where we're really strong in speak really good English. But being able to engage in local language, kind of with that respect and understanding of these companies, is meaningful. And so from the US, if you're trying to penetrate European markets, you might have some success in the UK. I mean, I think that's probably the first market where companies who want to go international will go, because it doesn't feel so foreign. And you can certainly have levels of success there. But I think once you start to get into other other markets where English is not the first language, it's going to be challenging. And you really have to understand product market fit. And like we made some of these mistakes early, kind of post merger, of just, hey, we have resources in these countries. Let's start selling some of these capabilities or some of these products, um, before it was really in a position that we could lean into it and scale. And just because something is working in the US doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work in Germany or Holland or Sweden. And while going international might sound like attractive, and there's all this untapped territory, and look at all this white space that we could go after. Um, it's I would consider it to be analogous to companies that maybe only sell to SMB and mid-market, saying like, I want to go enterprise. Like, do you really know what that means?
Mhm.
Like if you've been selling to companies 50 to 100 people, you have sales professionals that are good at working with like leaner organizations. Your marketing efforts are driving this. Your outbound is good at going after enterprise is a very different caliber. It's a different caliber of sales professional. It's an incredible amount of marketing investment. Your ability to penetrate these organizations, understand like the buying cycles and navigating multiple stakeholders. It's a whole other thing. The same way I would say it's like going from the US to any other country is going to come with things that you're probably not set up for.
Yep. Well, I'll have to say, Kevin, so I work at Hyros, and that's my day job. And we actually sell a lot to Germany and the EU. And one of the things is that Alex Becker, our founder, did is we have agency owners. There's this guy named Sebastian who owns this agency. He has like 500 clients. And so he is like the pinnacle person that is referring everybody to Hyros. So it's like you have to have that social proof. And it's so important. But once you have that, then these people will just come inbound and they just love us.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think if you can have established go-to-market partnerships or different channels that can be trusted extensions of your business who understand how to do business and execute like at scale with repeatability in those markets, that's probably a great way to get started. Working with partnerships. Because if you're not engaging with local culture in local language, content in those languages, and like you're not going to make a 7-figure investment to like set up offices and get people there and hire people who know that and can be brought into your company culture. Working with those types of relationships can be a really great option.
I want to shift gears for a second here and just kind of go back to your career in general. You mentioned that you're really an ops guy turned sales leader, right? In some ways. I mean, I don't know if I'm getting that right, but it sounds like operations was a pretty heavy part of how you started. That was a significant element of your role at IBM. And Scott Leese, who we're a big fan of, we've had him on the show a couple times. I remember him saying maybe like a year and a half or 2 years ago that his next VP of sales that he ever hired would be someone from the operations org, not necessarily from the sales org. I always thought that was really interesting, and I'm probably also misrepresenting his post, and he'll definitely call me on it. But I thought that was super interesting, and I've thought a lot about that because one trend that Chase and I have seen as we've had some of the top players in B2B on our show is that when you open up the hood, you see that they are very operational minded. The top closers tend to be people that have a very well organized system for how they do their deals. They have a very defined process for how they're bringing a customer through their pipeline, their own pipeline. Of course, they use the company's processes to complement their own, but they own their own operation, right? So I think it's really interesting, and I wanted to call this out for our listeners because I think a lot of our fans and our community ask us, how can we get on track to being either a top performing individual contributor, or how would we get on the path to being a sales leader, a CRO in a company like Dealfront? And I just wanted to call out that operations side. And then just see if you have any advice for sellers out there on how they can start to think more operationally about their process and their deals.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I agree with that perspective. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of different routes and paths to get to any number of leadership positions. But I will assert that I don't feel that my role is to sell. And I know that's going to sound weird. I think if I were to define my role cleanly, it's to help make the revenue engine work on behalf of my company that's supporting our strategy and the vision for the organization. And I use revenue very specifically because so much of that is the recurring revenue, right? And I'm sure there's listeners here who are very familiar with Jaco from Winning by Design. And he has repeatedly said, like, recurring value drives recurring revenue. And being able to have and work across the revenue bow tie from introduction with your brand, product, service, through being able to identify and qualify kind of buying cycles, proving that your product, technology, service can address a business problem and need. There's this mutual commitment that you're going to partner together, that you're going to deliver value, and they're making a commitment to work with you. And then you help drive that adoption, value realization, and you earn the right to hopefully renew and scale with them. There's so much that has to happen to make that work. That you understand what your sales cycle and process looks like, what onboarding looks like, how you're supporting these customers, what types of roles, how you're supporting them. Is it through self-service? Is it with humans? How much of this is being done with like product-led growth and partnership with the product and R&D teams? How much of it is human-driven? These different entry points into the buying process, and how we're working to empower these people with enablement, the system tools and insights we're using to make decisions. I mean, it's a very intricate puzzle. And I think in any revenue organization, there's multiple ways to put that puzzle together. But I think that's ultimately the biggest part of my job, is putting that puzzle together and ensuring people are empowered to do their jobs. And I've said it on other podcasts that my VP of sales and directors of sales, and even some of our top reps, they're better sales professionals than I am. I have no qualm saying that. I know the art of selling, right? And I can provide guidance and instruction to each and every one of them. But if we're in an actual deal, I'm sure most of them would perform better than me. But that's not my job. My job's to ensure that the revenue architecture and how the team is put together and the processes that support this to deliver value for the customers is working as best as it can.
Yeah. I think sales is so much more about like the analogy would be like the assembly line, right? And a really great book for anybody who wants to understand operations a little better is High Output Management by Andy Grove. I think most sellers don't think to pick up a book like that because it's inherently a leadership and an operations book. But to your point, like, yes, understanding sort of the art side of being a seller and knowing how people work and how people make decisions, but building the machine that can support the pipeline and the milestones and the contractual process and all of those things is as important in the equation as just having, that people skills ability or the ability to, jump on and pitch something on the fly. And I think if a seller can tune up both of those things, they're going to be very dangerous when they get in front of prospects, because not only are they going to be really good at telling great stories and, talking to prospects about their pain points and their problems, but then they can go and operationalize that and scale that up a little bit better.
Yeah. And I think that's well said. And I think you asked if I have any guidance for any frontline sales professionals. And I think what I would say is act as the CEO of your own business, right? And it's not just managing your opportunities, but there is somebody in my career who gave me this advice, and I apologize for not remembering who said it, but it is really understanding like the inputs and the outputs. And like, I remember going back a number of years, like sitting in like internal QBRs and reps, like presenting how they're going to approach the next quarter, and having one of the VP of sales asking, well, where do you want to be at the end of the year? Which I think is a pretty typical question to ask of any sales professional. And when you don't have an answer, it's bad. And it's if you're in any type of leadership role, like there are goals that you're working towards, there are outcomes you need to achieve. And yes, you have a quota, and obviously like, I want to achieve my quota. Okay. How much money do you want to earn? Does that mean you need to get to 110%, 150%? Are you okay being at 80%, whatever that is? But do you know what outcome you want to achieve? Okay. So in order to get there, how many wins do you need? How much pipeline do you need? How many customer calls do you need? How many meetings do you need each week? Right. And how much is coming? Like, how much can you depend on from inbound channels if you're fortunate enough to have something that's dependable? Right. And if that's not coming in, do you have the support from an SDR? Do you have to be accountable for your own pipeline build? How does that translate into the inputs that you need in order to get to those outputs? And if you can't tell me, Mr., Mrs., Miss Sales Professional, that in any given week, these are the things I need to be doing in terms of my activity, in terms of the meetings I need to have, the customer touch points, the pipeline I need to progress, the coverage I need to have. If this is falling out, what needs to go back on? If you're not thinking about that operationally, and you're just kind of taking the pipeline as it comes to you and handling those deals and managing them well, career progression into any type of leadership role will be troublesome, because I've seen far too many rock star A+ reps who can sell their way out of any situation and just can crush it no matter what territory you give them or what they're selling. But if they're not thinking necessarily in that operational way, then their ability to help other sales professionals is going to be challenged. Because if you're not thinking about that way for yourself, how are you going to help that? Because so much of sales leadership is going to go into those kinds of things. Because if you're missing on the outputs, you can only control the inputs. And it's how do you get the reps to be better at those kinds of things? And then obviously the execution across the sales process. But I'll stop there. I know that was a lengthy answer.
No, it's super helpful. I think it's a really important topic, and one that just gets, I don't want to say it gets slept on a lot in the industry, but it's one that I think as an early seller, I didn't realize how much impact it can have. And then to your point also, especially if you are someone who wants to become a leader in your organization, you really do have to get the operational side of things dialed in so that you can confidently lead a team of people and processes and scale things. So super, super important. I know we're coming up here on time. We want to give you plenty of time here because you're a busy guy building, a team and a product and everything else. You mentioned something about embedding your ICP into everything you do. I want to understand what you mean by that. And then after you answer that for us, just help our listeners understand where they can get in touch with you. And if they're interested in anything in Dealfront's product suite, how they can get plugged into that as well.
Awesome. No, thank you for that. And maybe I'll actually start there because I'll probably forget.
Sure.
So Kevin McIntyre, I'm not active on Twitter or X. So LinkedIn. So if you just type in Kevin McIntyre Dealfront, you will find me. I go in waves of my activity. Sometimes just like this toxic bubble of just go to market and tech sales professionals just talking at each other.
Yep.
Like I go in and out of just, guys, it's like we're talking to 1% of the market and all of our customers aren't paying attention to any of this, but neither here nor there. So that's how you can get in touch for Dealfront. I mean, obviously you can go to dealfront.com, probably the easiest way to get exposed to us, either through dealfront.com or leadfeeder.com. You can sign up for a free trial for web visitor identification technology. But if you're interested more on sales intelligence side, request a demo and we'd be happy to get in touch with you.
Awesome.
We are, like, as I mentioned, primarily European focused company. And a lot of our kind of sales intelligence work has been focused on European data sets. We are proud that we are announcing and launching really kind of an up-leveled U.S. data set for the U.S. market. Very crowded place. I mean, we know that there's a ton of options out there for the right B2B data to fuel your business. But in combination with our web visitor identification, we think it's a really nice pairing. It's going to be very economically attractive. So if you're interested, don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome.
With
link in the
respect
show
to the
notes. Yeah, we got a link in the show notes for sure.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
You're
Really
welcome.
appreciate that. With the ICP, this is something that I could talk forever about. And also I'll try and do it justice in a few minutes. This has been one of the most important projects I can say that I've ever been a part of throughout my career. And I start with just saying, what does an ICP or ideal customer profile, just making sure that everybody knows the acronym,
Sure.
what does it mean to your business and how is it used? My bet is that 80% of the listeners somewhere in the organization, there's a PowerPoint slide, a Google slide, a document that says our ideal customer profile. And it gives an industry, it gives a persona, it gives a couple pain points. You go through it when you're onboarded as a rep. Somebody asks you, what's our ICP? You can dust off that page and show it. And yeah, like maybe you do some, I don't know, lead scoring around it. But I bet most organizations, that's what it is. You have it defined, it's known, but how it's enforced in the organization and how your business is oriented towards it is sorely lacking. And I just as a preface to where I'm going with this, I was just at HubSpot Inbound conveniently here in Boston last week.
Oh, yeah.
And part of the keynote focused on why so many organizations are struggling right now, regardless of industry. It's not just all tech and SaaS guys. I mean, we're all going through just lower web traffic, lower conversion rates, and lower retention. And when you're experiencing all of those things, you want to ensure that the energy and the effort and the money that you're spending is going towards the customers who get value from your product or service and are delighted and retain and grow. And us, just like probably many of the listeners, certainly had some churn challenges. And I think a lot of organizations, particularly if your company existed pre-COVID, went through some pretty unprecedented growth when it was kind of growth at all costs. Everybody locked up, like, let's just buy all this technology to empower all of our remote companies. And then coming out of that, the economy shifted a bit, and we went from kind of growth at all costs to, hey, you know what? We need to think more sustainably about this, and its efficiency, its sustainability, its profitability is way more important than just kind of fueling unsustainable growth. And a lot of organizations were hit with some churn challenges, and we're not an exception to that. And so making sure, like, do we really understand who our best customers are? So we went on this very lengthy analysis across our approximately 10,000 customers, really understanding which are the customers who renew best. And we intentionally did not look at win rates, because I'm sure there are many customers that you win, but do they stay? Right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of companies make that mistake of looking at win rates. And we spent a lot of time looking at a number of different dimensions, traditional ones, right? Looking at the industry, looking at revenue, looking at employee count. We started embedding some product features, looking at use cases, looking at personas. And we were able to get very tight on 3 categories across our customer base. And we color coded them based on our Dealfront color scheme. So our best performing customer segment is blue, our medium performing customer segment is yellow, and our worst performing customer segment is gray. And there is a 30-point difference in retention between that gray segment and that blue segment. and being able
Wow.
to clearly define customers that fit into these different categories. And so being able to define that is one thing, but then orchestrating it across your comprehensive go-to-market engine has been something else. So now in our CRM, every single account that's in there is labeled with the color emoji. There's a blue circle, a yellow circle, or a gray circle. That when an account is added, whether it's auto-created from somebody going onto our website requesting a download, or like RevOps or the team adds it, it's automatically configured based on these inputs and parameters, like which category is this? In our Tableau and reporting and data visualization, being able to understand that like our MQLs or our product qualified leads, and looking at the progression of our sales cycle, I can tell you what percentage of our MQLs generated last week were blue, yellow, or gray.
Interesting.
And I can
Wow.
tell you my customer, my pipeline of all of our sales opportunities. I can give win rates by customer category, and we start looking at retention differently. Well, maybe perhaps this gray category of customers are customers that we're not going to proactively win. We're not going to try and invest in winning more of those types of customers. So we really want to see, like, is net retention and gross retention and expansion happening better in these segments? Not that we don't care about those kind of gray profile customers, but they're just not as important to us because they don't retain, and our ability to make them stay with us is limited. So now our customer success organization, they don't cover the gray customers anymore.
Wow.
And it's only support led and self-service and improving documentation. Like, we want them to get value from our product, but history and data tells us that they're not going to retain very well. So we're going to put our humans on these more prominent categories. And so having every data point across our go-to-market ecosystem, that if you tell me what was a conversion rate last week, or how many wins did we have, or what customers churned, or where did expansion, every single one of those questions can be followed with, what category was it from? How does that break apart from blue, yellow, and gray for our business? And I think what we are doing and the decisions that we're making to start doing like lightweight ABM at only blue profile accounts, and making sure that our SDRs and outbound efforts are only focused on these types of segments, and starting to change the composition and volume of our pipeline to be more oriented towards these higher performing segments. I am willing to bet that there are not many other organizations that have done this to this level of sophistication. And it's something I'm very proud of. And now we're empowered to make real decisions on where to spend marketing, how to spend marketing, how to incentivize salespeople, how to best cover our customers, and how potentially that we can experiment within these different segments. And are there areas in yellow, for example, that we want to test to see if we can make those higher performing customers for us? So I just think in this mind shift and kind of strategy shift within SaaS that we're going towards, where efficiency, sustainability, like good LTV to CAC ratios, CAC payback kind of under 12 months, making sure that you're focused on the right types of customers and you understand who your best customer truly is a really important thing for businesses.
Amazing. Wow. It sounds like an incredible process that y'all have for this to actually operationalize this. And super valuable for folks out there listening, just to kind of see how the sausage gets made, so to speak, behind the scenes. Like, very awesome. Well, Kevin, this has been a great conversation. We know you got a hard stop coming up here. We want to give you plenty of time back. And we'll be sure to include links in the show notes for how to get in touch with you, and of course, where to go sign up for Dealfront and Leadfeeder.
Awesome. Now, appreciate the time, guys. Just thanks again, and wish you both well.
Cheers. Ciao.
All right.